July 22, 1986. Picture this. Inside Mexico City's sweltering Azteca Stadium, more than 100,000 roaring fans are watching the tension absolutely boil over. It's Argentina versus England, a World Cup quarter-final. But honestly, the atmosphere feels like the weight of the entire world is pressing down onto the pitch. Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're stepping right back into that electric atmosphere to unpack a dramatic, split-second sequence of events that fundamentally changed football history forever.
Okay, let's dive right into this. A little with the head of Maradona, and a little with the hand of God. Man, what a quote. That phrase, delivered by the legendary and insanely gifted Diego Maradona, defines a fraction of a second that has sparked nearly 4 decades of intense, relentless debate. It's this profound story of a bitter rivalry, of unimaginable sporting genius, and of a referee's completely uncorrected human mistake. But to truly understand the sheer gravity of this match, we really have to look outside the stadium walls first. The historical context here is just striking. Just 4 years before these two teams stepped onto the pitch in Mexico, Argentina and the United Kingdom fought the Falklands War in 1982. This was a profoundly impactful conflict where hundreds of lives were lost, and it left a deeply, deeply emotional chapter in the histories of both nations. And so, just 4 short years later, these two nations were colliding again, only this time it was on the world's absolute biggest sporting stage. Because of that history, there was a massive gap between the official and unofficial stakes at this match. Officially, the players insisted that politics and sports must remain completely separate. But unofficially, media coverage in both countries was heavily emphasizing the significance of the encounter. For the fans in the stands and the millions watching back home, victory carried an impossibly heavy symbolic weight. The raw emotions surrounding the occasion took a regular World Cup quarterfinal and amplified it into a massive, unstoppable cultural phenomenon. With all that heavy context hanging in the air, the match kicks off. The first half is this fierce, grinding battle, ending 0-0. And then we hit minute 51. That is when an immortal sequence of events began. So picture this unfolding in real time. Maradona exchanges passes near England's penalty area. Suddenly, the ball ricochets awkwardly, popping high up into the air. England's goalkeeper, Peter Shilton, rushes forward to clear it. Maradona, carrying the hopes of his entire nation on his shoulders, leaps toward the descending ball. Now, let's talk about the sheer physics of this moment for a second. Shilton is the taller man, right? Plus, he has the advantage of using his hands legally. He absolutely should reach this ball first, but he doesn't. Instead, the ball sails directly into the back of the net.
And, the immediate chaotic aftermath was a scene of stark contrast. On one side, the Argentine players erupt, celebrating wildly. On the other side, the English players are sprinting toward the referee, protesting furiously. They know exactly what just happened. And within moments, television replays reveal it to the entire world. Maradona hadn't headed the ball. He had blatantly used his left hand. Which brings us to a fascinating piece of the puzzle. How on earth did a blatant handball actually count? Well, you have to remember that the reality of officiating in 1986 is just staggering when compared to today. The referee was Ali Ben Nasser of Tunisia. His assistant referee, positioned way over on the completely opposite side of the field. This pivotal moment happened in a literal fraction of a second. Maradona jumped, Shilton jumped, the ball changed direction, and the crowd erupted. Ben Nasser briefly looked toward his assistant. Seeing absolutely no signal for an infringement, he had to rely entirely on his own human judgment. He pointed to the center circle, he awarded the goal. A single, uncorrected human error permanently altered the course of history.
Which naturally forces us to ask a question that comes up every single time this moment is discussed. Would the hand of God survive the modern technology we use to watch football today? The answer is a definitive, absolute no. Modern football fans live in an era of video assistant referees, or VAR. Replays are reviewed, offside lines are drawn, and handballs are analyzed from half a dozen different camera angles. VAR would have overturned Ben Nasser's decision within seconds. But honestly, the lack of machines in 1986 is exactly why this moment is so legendary. It occurred in an era where the sport depended entirely on vulnerable human eyes. Because the outrage, the error, and the controversy, that was literally only half the story of that afternoon. The sheer proximity of what happens next is mind-blowing. Just 4 minutes after scoring the most heavily disputed goal in the history of the sport, Maradona decides to completely transcend the controversy. He receives the ball deep inside his own half and begins a run for the ages.
One by one, English defenders try to stop him, and one by one, they fail. He accelerates with this impossible balance, demonstrating a close control where the ball practically looks glued to his foot. He eliminates nearly the entire English defense, covering more than half the field, before finally slipping past Peter Shilton to calmly finish. The stadium simply erupts. Commentators are left literally breathless. It was a supernatural sequence that FIFA supporters would later formally vote as the goal of the century.
So, the crucial point we really need to take away here is the astonishing contrast between these two moments. The first goal was illegal, deeply controversial, and generated worldwide outrage. The second goal was pure, undeniable brilliance that inspired global admiration. Many people believe that if the first goal had never even happened, the goal of the century alone would have easily cemented Maradona's place in football history. Instead, these two absolute extremes of football occurred within 4 extraordinary minutes, transforming an already great player into an immortal icon.
2-1. When the final whistle blew, the score stood at 2-1. Argentina emerged victorious, and weeks later they would go on to lift the World Cup trophy.
So, where does that leave us today? Let's bring this explainer into the present and look at why this moment continues to captivate the world. Well, the debate lives on for a few really key reasons. First, the hand of God has permanently entered the global sporting vocabulary. It represents the ultimate, dramatic clash between human error and sheer genius. Furthermore, this very incident catalyzed the arguments that eventually brought us video review systems. Think about the incredible paradox here. Today's VAR exists specifically to prevent incidents exactly like this from ever happening again. But if modern tech existed back in 1986, the goal is disallowed, and one of football's most famous stories just ceases to exist. It transcended the boundaries of sport, becoming a cultural touchstone passed down to every new generation of fans. Which leaves us right here, looking back at Azteca Stadium, at the heavy shadow of war, at the vulnerable human referee, and at the unmatched genius of Diego Maradona. Was the hand of God a blatant act of cheating? Was it ruthless competitive cleverness? Or was it simply the raw, unpolished, beautiful mess of football history unfolding in real time? I'll leave you to ponder that.